Welcome back to the Leadership Series, Season 2. I'm Akshatha. In today's episode, we're talking about how generative AI has been evolving and the kind of breakthroughs that are shaping where it's headed next, both in terms of business impact and future possibilities. We're starting the season with Sridhar Mantha, CEO of Generative AI Business Services at Happiest Minds. So, Sridhar, let's begin with your perspective. How do you see the journey of GenAI unfolding over the last few years?
Every technology goes through the tipping point, right? We have seen that with every technology. Let's say, for example, AI. Even though it has been there from the 1950s onwards, we have seen the tipping point coming as machine learning, let us say around 2004 with the Google's paper. We can even see IoT, for example. People used to call it a M2M, but we did see the tipping point of that somewhere around 8 to 10 years back. And people call utility computing that turned into cloud computing. Very similarly, when it comes to generative AI also, there is a constant evolution that was happening. However, we can surely and very clearly can see the tipping point as ChatGPT release. And once a tipping point happens, all the smart people in the world generally flock around that technology. And compared to the previous examples I have given, one can easily say after the tipping point, the rise of ChatGPT technologies and the ecosystem has been much more rapidly evolving, maybe thanks to the interconnectedness of the people and various other social factors, etc. So once ChatGPT has very clearly demonstrated, we could very clearly see almost every week, every month, new technology surrounding it is coming. Now, one can argue that agentic AI is another layer on the top of generative AI, fundamentally leveraging the same LLMs and the technologies. And reasoning engines are becoming better and better, and also moving beyond text. The ChatGPT technologies and the initial solutions predominantly around text. And now we started already seeing a lot more of the content creation and new kind of generative AI around images and around videos. And now we, within Happiest Minds and within GBS also, we are working on interpreting electric circuit diagrams and creating CAD designs, etc.
What recent breakthroughs in generative AI do you find more interesting?
So, if we recollect the early stages of generative AI, we have seen a lot of concerns around hallucination, right? And of course, fundamentally, the technology is guessing the next word. And we had to do a lot of checks and balances and the guardrails to ensure that it is reasoning somewhat closer to human being. Of course, the larger models have really huge amount of understanding and pretty much most of the human interactions that happen on the internet, etc. However, the most exciting part is the reasoning capabilities of LLMs actually take us towards the holy grail of artificial general intelligence, even though it is, in my personal opinion, really far. So especially the reasoning capabilities, even though the earlier models used to mimic, now we are getting more and more closer to the human reasoning. That is very, very exciting because that truly can create a lot of solutions where human intelligence or a superior human intelligence is required.
That's nice. So, how are advancements like memory, reasoning, and tool use changing the way we build Gen AI applications?
A lot of times, it is the underlying hardware typically becomes a limiting factor. I can take two examples to illustrate this a little bit better, right? We all have seen more of spatial computing, you can call it, or you can call it as a metaverse, or you can call it as a virtual reality headsets, right? Even though there has been a lot of excitement about the potential, no one can deny about a conceptual potential of such technology. However, we have seen the hardware limitations of the technology truly launching off in the last couple of years. Hence, unless we have an extremely miniaturized, extremely simple to wear, maybe something like a glasses or even more miniaturized versions of the technology, I don't think a broad-based adoption happens around it. Maybe the second example I'll illustrate is quantum computing. Even though theoretically a lot of algorithms were being made and a lot of calculations, etc. we could do, unfortunately, with all the progress, still the underlying physics creates a lot more noise than to our satisfaction, right? Hence, we are able to use this technology with very limited use cases. However, when it comes to generative AI, right, one can truly say the underlying hardware technology, be it from NVIDIA predominantly, as well as with other very few players, that truly allowed us to create massive data center, right, where we can create billions of parameters of the model. Now, without, one can argue that the kind of investment Microsoft made, creating a massive data center with all the kinds of NVIDIA hardware, which are extremely fast at creating the AI models, etc. Probably ChatGPT creation would have been much more delayed and would have left as a conceptual solution, like the previous two examples, would have taken a lot more time. Now, there is a lot more acceleration also happening around hardware chipsets. Because of the excitement with a lot of players jumping into it, we could very clearly see, in a way, it is creating a geopolitical conflicts also between multiple countries in this race. So it is very exciting times for us to see how the massive data centers with the capabilities to just create and run large language models. Of course, there are water problems and other kind of issues, but people are building them. So it will become sooner much more complicated models that can generate videos, right, which all of us can use, can run on reasonably moderate sized data centers because of the advancements in the chipsets.
That's interesting. Which industries are being transformed the most by these Gen AI innovations?
Sometimes when we get a technology that could be typically applicable for certain verticals only, right? If we take something like an IoT, at least in the initial stages, subsequently the rest will start adopting it. I'll take IoT as a parallel to draw because it was well established already, right? Typically the segments like industrial and manufacturing caught IoT as a technology in the initial stages. However, slowly it started transforming into Internet of Consumer Things, Internet of Medical Things. So at this point in time, it is very difficult for us to visualize buying any security camera or a security lock or anything in your house which you generally cannot control with your mobile phone. So pretty much Internet of Consumer Things is there. And at this point in time, pretty much any personal wearable devices that we buy or something to track your diabetes or the blood sugar constantly, everything is connected to your mobile phone and to the internet. So that way, initial adoption could be in one or two verticals, and then the other verticals will follow. However, when it comes to generative AI, it is so horizontal, right? A text generation or an image generation, these kind of things, or reasoning, right, are applicable across every industry. Right? And some industries are trying to push it to the boundaries, right, in the life sciences kind of thing. So the most exciting part is the closest is you can compare this with machine learning. So when machine learning came, which verticals it is applicable? Almost all verticals, or not even almost all verticals. The same is true with generative AI, and that's what we are seeing in the market. All verticals very similarly are adopting it, even though in the initial stages it's looked like edutech can get more benefit, right, which no longer is true. Pretty much every industry is adopting it equally.
That's insightful. So, with rapid progress comes new risks. How are organizations addressing challenges like hallucinations, compliance, or data security?
So, anytime a new technology comes, it's pretty scary, right? And people will look at how to use it. At the same time, some people or certain segments of the society will look at how to break it. And it probably, one can argue, saying that it is a human curiosity, right? You give a toy to 2 5-year-old kids, one will try to play, one will try to break. So the similar approach is taken around large language models because it created so much enthusiasm and interest. And there is always a lot of fear of unknown. Oh, we are trying to deploy it first time. So what happens? Again, as a cyber threats and cyber attacks, etc. Right? And what happens when it, I won't say hallucination, what happens if it gives wrong answer? Whatever is the reason, right? In certain use cases, getting 80% accuracy could be perfectly okay. Getting 90% is okay. 95% could be okay. But there are certain use cases, even 99.99% is also not okay. Let us take something like a medical advice, right? It could be either used by the patients directly or doctors, especially when the patients are using, even 99.9% accuracy is also not enough. Hence, hey, how do I trust the accuracy of this solution where CIOs or CEOs or the salespeople are trying to query against the data? What if they get the wrong information based on the English text they entered? So there are a lot of concerns around accuracy. Unfortunately, these being statistical models, we never at least for some time, we never will be in a position to reach 100% accuracy. That being said, agentic architecture can give some interesting solutions where one agent gives the answer, other agent verifies it. The way typically humans work, right? When I propose something as a strategy, somebody else in my team critiques it. So by putting such mechanisms as agents, we can overcome the accuracy part of it, right? And and when it comes to the other cybersecurity threats, right, there are certain concerns about having public-facing solutions, right, especially when they become sensitive. So, of course, constantly industry is evolving in creating guardrails, right, additional security mechanisms. And at this point in time, one can argue saying that, of course, we never can truly reach 100% secure solutions, even with the traditional cloud solutions also. But we are getting closer and closer. And as we can very clearly see, in the last 6 months, I don't recollect any major security breach around LLM kind of news compared to the early stages of LLMs. So I think we are at this point in time ready for building enterprise-grade solutions, provided we keep an eye on the required accuracy and put in the necessary guardrails. That being said, the broader frameworks, ethical frameworks, and what is the ethics and what is the right way of using it, those kind of debates and discussions, of course, they subdued a little bit, however, compared to 3 or 6 months back. But still, the teams at the country level, organizations level are trying to integrate. Of course, organizations already have AI ethics some kind of AI ethics around machine learning, etc. LLM-related information is getting integrated. If countries or certain organizations don't have it, this is an opportunity for them to actually create one that covers AI, ML, GenAI, and everything on what is a responsible AI for their organization.
Sridhar, what do you see as the next big frontier in generative AI, and how should leaders prepare for it?
Now, speculation is always fun. None of us have crystal balls, but I'll try to zoom only into the next 1 to 3 years, right? And of course, already I think even what we use as the word like an agentic AI, the whole idea is multiple LLMs collaborating, right? In a simplistic and primitive ways, one individual sitting and trying to solve a problem versus group of individuals with very clearly defined role, trying to collaborate with similar intelligence, but with a little bit of different backgrounds. That's how, as humans, we progress. Now, it's exactly the same as what agentic AI is, in the sense that multiple LLMs might not be the same, compare that to the different backgrounds or educational backgrounds, right? So we can take the ChatGPT kind of LLM, couple them with the smaller open source LLMs or LLMs from Amazon, Google, etc. So that becomes very interesting collaborative environment. So we'll see more and more complex and interesting use cases and problems will be solved with the help of generative AI being foundation, but agentic AI kind of architecture coming out so that we can actually address the previous problems like the accuracy, etc. So in terms of the complex enterprise solutions which requires human intelligence, which is typically what is part of the intelligent automation, etc., will be addressed with the agentic AI. Of course, there's a lot more excitement in terms of non-text related models, right? And we started seeing the glimpses of them. However, as we touched upon the hardware earlier, when you touch upon the image generation, of course, I think very recently, a lot of Indians and across the globe, we all wanted to convert our pictures into some kind of cartoonish images, right? And that pretty much brought down a lot of LLM data centers to its knees. Now imagine video generation. Right? We are talking about much more complicated, computerly intensive kind of generative AI coming out. So, and beyond that, of course, the excitement is the ability for the generative AI to understand the DNA structures or understand the electrical circuit diagrams or understand the CAD designs natively. Today, we are trying to interpret them with LLM capabilities, right? If you call a LLM like earlier versions of ChatGPT, more of text native, right? Of course, now we live in the multimodal world, but each of the model is image native or a text native. We should be seeing in the next 2 to 3 years, CAD native, right? And circuit diagrams native or protein structures native models. And that is where truly we'll start seeing a significant boost of productivity as well as innovation in many industries.
Thank you, Sridhar, for the insightful conversation on the future of generative AI. We'll be back soon with more voices shaping tomorrow. Until then, stay curious and stay inspired.